You're sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through your phone, completely unbothered. You feel free. But that freedom, it isn't a default setting. It was built piece by 9 people in a room arguing over words that changed your life before you were even born. Today, we're looking at the Supreme Court cases that are crazier than anything on Netflix and the reason you're allowed to live the way you do. In this video, we're going to cover 5 cases. Each one hit different. Each one flips something in this country on its head. By the end of this, you're going to look at America completely differently. So if you're new here, hit subscribe. This is the kind of content that makes you that person at the dinner table who actually knows what they're talking about. Let's get into it. Here's the thing most people don't realize. The Supreme Court wasn't always powerful. When the country first started, Congress and the president were the big dogs. The Supreme Court, it was basically an afterthought. Judges didn't even have their own building. They rode around the country on horseback, hearing cases like traveling salesmen. So how did 9 judges become the most powerful interpreters of law in the entire nation? One word: Marbury. In 1800, Thomas Jefferson wins the presidency. His political rivals, the Federalists, had spent their last days in power cramming the government with judges they picked. One of those judges, a guy named William Marbury. He got appointed, but his paperwork, his commission, never got delivered before Jefferson took office. Marbury sued. He said, "Hey, I was appointed. Give me my job." And here's where it gets brilliant. The Chief Justice at the time, John Marshall, could have just ruled in Marbury's favor and started a fight with Jefferson, but instead, he did something way smarter. He said Marbury deserved the job, but the court couldn't give it to him because the law that let Marbury sue was actually unconstitutional. Sound confusing? Here's why it matters. Marshall just gave the Supreme Court the power to decide what the Constitution actually means. That's called judicial review. And from that moment on, no law passed by Congress, no order from the president could stand if the Supreme Court said it violated the Constitution. The court didn't just win a case that day, it became the referee of the entire country. Okay, this one hits different. For almost 60 years, there was a legal rule in America that said black and white kids couldn't go to the same school, and the government called it fair. Separate and equal, they called it. The idea was, as long as black schools were just as good as white schools, it was totally fine to keep them apart. Except they weren't just as good, not even close. Black schools had crumbling buildings, outdated textbooks, sometimes no textbooks at all. Meanwhile, white schools looked brand new. The resources were night and day. So a group of parents, led by a woman named Linda Brown in Kansas, said enough. Their daughter had to walk past a white school every single day to get to a black school on the other side of the town. That doesn't sound equal to anyone. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and in 1954, Chief Justice Earl Warren stood up and read the opinion himself, which almost never happens. He looked at the justices and said something that changed everything. He said, "Does the segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race deprive the minority children of equal educational opportunities?" We conclude unanimously, yes. Unanimously, 9-0. The court didn't just rule that segregation was unfair. It said segregation was psychologically damaging to children. It said being told you're lesser by your own government leaves a mark. Brown v. Board didn't fix everything overnight. Schools fought back. Protests erupted. It took years to enforce. But that single ruling cracked open the door for the entire civil rights movement. Without Brown, so much of what followed, the marches, the legislation, the progress, doesn't happen the same way.
You've seen it 1,000 times in movies. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Yeah, that's not just a movie line. That's a Supreme Court rule. And it exists because of one guy named Ernesto Miranda. Miranda was arrested in Arizona in 1963 on serious charges. The police brought him in, sat him down, and started questioning him. No lawyer present. Nobody told him he could stay quiet. And after 2 hours of interrogation, he signed a confession. Here's the problem. Miranda had no idea he had the right to stay silent. He didn't know he could demand a lawyer, and the police, they never told him. When the case hit the Supreme Court, the justices had to ask a big question. Is a confession valid if the person didn't actually know they had rights? The court said no. From that day forward, every single person arrested in America has to be told out loud what their rights are before they're questioned. The right to stay silent, the right to a lawyer, the whole thing. People call it the Miranda warning now. It's named after the guy whose case created it. Here's the wild twist though. Miranda himself, he went back to trial after the Supreme Court threw out his first confession, and he was convicted again anyway, based on other evidence. But the rules stayed, because the court wasn't just protecting him, it was protecting everyone. Think about it. The next time you see a cop read someone their rights on TV, that's the Supreme Court at work, making sure the government can't just squeeze a confession out of someone who doesn't know they have options. Now this one is going to be a conversation starter at Thanksgiving dinner. In 1973, the Supreme Court made a ruling that said women had a constitutional right to make their own decisions about pregnancy. That was Roe v. Wade. For 50 years, that was the law of the land. It wasn't perfect. There were always debates about limits and restrictions, but the core idea was settled until 2022. In the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade entirely. They said the right to abortion was never actually in the Constitution to begin with, and that the decision should go back to individual states. Overnight, the rules changed completely depending on where you lived. Here's what makes this case so important for understanding how America works. It shows that Supreme Court decisions aren't permanent. They can be overturned. What one court decides, another court can undo. And it shows how much power those 9 justices actually have over everyday life. This isn't some abstract legal debate. This decision directly affected millions of real people, real families, real lives. Whether you're on one side of this issue or the other, or somewhere in the middle, you can't deny it. This is one of the most consequential things the Supreme Court has ever done. This one's personal for a lot of people. For most of American history, same-sex couples couldn't get married. It wasn't just a social thing. It was legally impossible in most states. No marriage license, no hospital visitation rights, no shared tax benefits, none of it. Jim Obergefell lived in Ohio. He and his partner, John Arthur, had been together for years. Arthur was seriously ill. Obergefell flew him to Baltimore, one of the few states where they could legally marry, just so they could tie the knot before it was too late. When Arthur passed away, Ohio refused to put Obergefell's name on the death certificate as his spouse, so Obergefell sued. The case went all the way to the top, and in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 decision that the Constitution guarantees same-sex couples the right to marry in every single state. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote the opinion, and one line from it has been quoted everywhere since. He wrote that the right to marry is fundamental. It's about dignity, autonomy, and the freedom to make your own life. That ruling changed the lives of millions of people. Couples who had waited decades finally got married. Families were legally recognized for the first time. It wasn't unanimous. It was 5-4, which means one single vote made the difference. One vote, millions of lives changed. So here's what I want you to take away from all this. The Supreme Court isn't just some dusty institution you hear about on the news once in a while. These 9 people, 9 human beings, make decisions that shape the country you live in every single day. Marbury gave them the power to interpret the Constitution. Brown told America that separate was never equal. Miranda made sure the government can't just squeeze a confession out of someone who doesn't know they have options. Roe and Dobbs showed us that even the biggest decisions can be reversed. And Obergefell proved that the definition of rights can expand. Every single one of these cases touched your life, whether you realize it or not. And here's the thing, there are more cases coming. Right now, as we speak, the Supreme Court is hearing cases that could change the rules of the game again. Immigration, technology, free speech, AI. The next landmark case, it might be happening right now. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously. If this video made you see America a little differently, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe because we've got way more content coming like this. Drop a comment below. Which case surprised you the most? I genuinely want to know. Peace.